everybody. Welcome to another episode. I'm Mike Monticello.
I'm Steve Ellick.
I'm Emily Thomas.
Emily, feels like forever since we've been on a podcast together.
It has. It's been like literal years.
It's nice to see you. And Steve, this is your second podcast ever?
Yes, the first time with you guys.
That's awesome. Well, happy to have you guys. And of course, we're happy to be with all you folks out there watching and listening to this. Today, we have a pretty interesting vehicle to talk about, and that's the redesigned 2023 BMW X1. Now, in this case, sometimes we rent vehicles from automakers for our first drives, first impressions. But in this case, this is all ours, baby, right? I mean,
yeah, this is our X1.
This is going to be our test vehicle, and we will put it through 2,000 break-in miles, like we do with all of the vehicles that go through our test program. So that's what we're doing right now. And today, we're going to just give kind of our first impressions of what we think about it to this point. And so, what is the X1? Well, it's BMW's entry-level SUV. And for 2023, it's a little bit larger. It has a little more power. It has 13 more horsepower out of its 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. But maybe the big news is that they've gone from a conventional 8-speed automatic transmission to a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission. I know that just blew your mind, Emily, because you're like,
big news, and I'm like,
I love talking about transmissions. But we'll talk about that later and how it does or doesn't affect the car. As with the last X1, it's based on a front-wheel drive-based platform that's shared with the BMW 2 Series Grand Coupe and the Mini Cooper Countryman. So we bought an X1 xDrive 28i Premium, which with a few options came out to $46,495. And now I said the big news is the switch to a dual-clutch transmission, but maybe the best news is that for 2023, blind spot warning, rear cross traffic warning, and reverse automatic emergency braking are standard. Before they weren't even available on the X1. So that's great news.
That's
right?
a big improvement.
Yeah. So we're happy about that. We didn't like everything about the last X1. It, the handling, because again, it's on a front wheel drive based platform, not really quite to that BMW level of performance. And also the front seats weren't really all that comfortable. But Steve, we weren't the only ones that didn't like some things about the X1. I mean, owner satisfaction wasn't exactly great either, right?
So yeah, the last generation X1 had lower owner satisfaction as well. And that's pretty typical for that class, the entry-level luxury compact SUVs. It's the Mercedes-Benz GLB, the GLA, the Audi Q3. They promise these luxury brand names, and then they're really at the bottom. They're the bottom class, and the owners don't really like that they don't deliver on that luxury promise.
Yeah, so people are thinking they're getting this luxury or sporty nameplate, but then they're kind of a little let down with what they're getting.
Right, because you think you're getting the luxury part of it. So you're expecting some nicer finishes, some, nicer features. And then you're kind of like, oh, this is just meh with like an Ivy League name to it kind of thing. So
wow. Okay, so let's get into this new X1 and the areas that maybe they have improved or haven't improved. And since this is a utility vehicle, right? It's an SUV. Let's start with some interior stuff, Doc M's. Folks, I call her Doc M sometimes because she actually has a PhD. She actually, when I first started working here, she told me I had to call her Dr.
I
Emily
obviously
Thomas.
demanded it of him.
No, but if I call her Doc M's, that's why, because she actually has a PhD. So let's talk interior. When you get into this vehicle, is it pretty easy to get going or, use the infotainment system and controls, or where are you with that?
So I found the infotainment system to be pretty straightforward, actually, because it's also very limited in its capabilities. Like there's only a few buttons.
Well, everything's there in the screen.
Yeah, there's only a few buttons. The screen and the menu for me was pretty easy to navigate, so I didn't have an issue with that. The whole getting going part, though, and stopping, I had more trouble with.
So stopping, usually we hit the brake pedal.
Yes, thank you. I do need to re-enroll in Monty's driving classes, apparently, with this particular car. But I did not like that the gear selector, so it's, on the center strip, right? But it blends into all the other buttons there because it's just like a toggle button. And it's very easy to miss that that's actually your gear selector.
Right.
And then to top it all off, there is no park. Like normally in your gear selector, you can get to park. And so I can see the little screen next to my toggle button. I see there's a P. I cannot figure out for the life of me how to toggle over because it's to the right. So I'm like toggling up and down and trying to like push the toggle button to see if it'll actually ever engage park. It does not, because every time I let up off the brake, the car moves again, which was a really good indicator that I was not actually in park. So I was in the shop and basically just kept my foot on the park until one of our senior auto technicians, Joe Veselak, came through, and I was like, "Hey, Joe, how do I park the X1?" And he peeks his head in and he's like, "Just turn it off." He's like, "I don't know, just turn the car off."
I mean, that is one way to do it,
It's
because they will. There's a safety mechanism that will put it into park.
Yeah, but I feel like that shouldn't be the actual solution, and it's not, according to the vehicle owner's manual. The parking brake button, which is below.
There's a button. Yeah, you're supposed to press the P button.
But it's the parking brake button.
Well, it says
That did
P.
work out for me too, because I also couldn't find.
I just pressed P.
I couldn't
In
find the
every
park
other
either.
car, it's the parking brake button.
Yeah. So, folks, what we're talking about is what would be, I guess you could call it like a monostable gear selector lever. And basically, you push it forwards for reverse, and you pull it back to go into drive, and then you push a button, right, to hit
The parking brake button.
Which is
the parking
not
brake button.
the button that you use to select your other gears.
I totally
though.
can see the confusion. I think once you get used to it, you'd be fine with it.
Well, yeah, once you
Yeah.
find it the first time, eventually.
Right. But
it's just...
Again, and we do, this is one of the things we talk about at CR is that these electronic gear selectors that don't always make driving better. You know, we're so used to the PRNDL, gear selector that makes sense. Like you push it, it goes in the order
Right.
of the way it's labeled, right?
So
and
the order is
these
off,
ones, right? So these don't always do that. I totally get that.
And why reinvent the wheel of having an additional step rather than what you're already using to select your gears? Why have an additional button?
I don't know. I know they do what they got to do. I didn't love all the controls because what they've done is they've gotten rid of the physical. Well, first of all, so this is an iDrive system that doesn't use the iDrive controller.
That's
so
right.
That's
Everything's up in this curved. You've got this kind of slightly curved giant screen that they're going to, and so there's no more physical climate buttons or knobs or anything like that. Everything's in the touchscreen, and that's kind of what bothered me about it. Is that if you want to make any climate adjustment other than changing the driver and front passenger temperature, you have to hit the climate button on the screen to then bring up another
the
menu.
climate menu.
Right, the climate menu to bring up the actual climate screen. And that kind
Exactly.
of bothered me a little bit. Like you just can't make a quick fan speed change or anything like
So wait,
that.
that bothered you more than the parking button?
Yeah, Doc Ems, I drive so many of these cars that I get used to this stuff so quick that I honestly...
You're just so fast.
No, it's not that. It's just I think I'm in so many all the time that
You're constantly
forced.
having to
But
redo it.
when I first got in it, I was like, okay, how does this thing work? And for some reason, sometimes they come easily and sometimes they don't. And this one it didn't.
I agree with Monty. I mean, what I do too. I'm constantly adjusting the temperature in the car, the seat heat, the steering wheel heat, and you have to really navigate within the screen to get to those things instead of in the prior BMWs, you just hit a button for the seat heat. It's pretty easy.
So I kind of think they went a step backwards with this. It looks cool, but I think they went a step backwards. Let's talk about the seat because I love the front seats.
I love that seat.
Yeah. I know you're kind of a sporty driving guy. So.
The sport seats, we did get the sport seat option in this one, and they're fantastic seats. They really are. I feel like the side bolsters just hug me when I sit in them. The thigh extenders,
So good.
I felt perfect. Just like everything was at an arm's reach. Where I was sitting, the position, and everything about it. I did like it, and it was comfortable.
Yeah, it felt like you were in a slightly elevated sports car, almost,
Yeah.
or sports sedan. That's how good the seat was. But I know
I imagined that I was in a hatchback.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm going to have the unpopular opinion the whole show.
no, because we're just going to move on.
You're just going to ignore me
We're going to
altogether. is
move
what's gonna
on
happen.
to you guys both have kids. This is a sport utility vehicle. So let's talk about the rear seat because that's very important when you have kids. How was it for you and for hauling your brood around? I don't know if you're allowed to say brood, but
I didn't haul my brood this time, but I did do my evaluations in the back seat. And
your car seat evaluation.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do child seat fit in every test car. And I do a variety of seat types. So we'll do infant car seats, we'll do convertibles, rear facing and forward facing, and we do high back boosters.
Yep.
So my experience was different than Steve's. And
I lived with this car for a weekend, and at first I looked at it and I said, these rear seats are small. And then I put a forward facing seat and a rear facing seat in it. And while there's no room in between them, so like no one could fit in that middle seat, but as a family of four, we fit in the car pretty well. You would think it's cramped, but it didn't feel cramped for such a small amount of space. Like, it was okay.
Because it is a small vehicle.
It is a small vehicle, and that's why I think we disagree. Because in my evaluations, so I found that for rear-facing car seats, you really had to push those front seats pretty far forward.
Right.
And so like when I do that evaluation, I'm looking to see like, okay, again, I mean, I've been pretty clear about this. I'm not tall by like any stretch of the imagination. So I'm like average at best, you know. And so when I sit in front of a rear facing car seat, if my knees are touching the dash, or, you know, there's hardly any room between my knees and the dash, I would say maybe like a short front passenger can sit up there.
Yeah.
But for your average sized human, they likely will not be able to sit comfortably.
But you were.
We were fine. Maybe it helps that we're a short family.
The three of us are not exactly, you know,
we're not
stretching the reaches of height here. So, but so is that just purely a matter of there's nothing really, wrong with this car? It's just small, right? That's all that's
right. It's smaller. So I feel like it just sort of drives home the point that when we do our evaluations in cars, right, there's a lot of options out there for, you know, child seats. We can only test with a certain configuration. We cannot test every single configuration in every model. The models that Steve has for his family and for his family's needs fit in this car for them.
I see what you're
saying. Which is why it's super important that if you are buying this car and you have to put child seats in there, before you make the purchase, take your child seats with you to the dealership, install them, make sure that it actually does work for your family.
Yeah.
So our ratings are great in giving you a sense as to the potential fit, but every combination is unique. And so it just sort of drives home the point that you really need to try it out for your own people.
So you may look like a dork, but bring your child seats to the dealer. Okay, like I said, right there. Just kidding. I'm kidding. But okay. So enough about car seats. I love talking about child seats. You know that. But this is BMW, Steve. So let's talk about what it's like to drive this thing.
I thought for an entry-level vehicle, this is a very nice car where BMW is able to trickle down a little bit of that driving performance DNA. I like driving it. I thought the power was ample from the engine. I wasn't ever really desiring any more. I mean, more power would be better, but always. But I didn't think it needed any more. The shifts from the sequential gearbox are lightning quick and smooth. And I thought it handled pretty well for the class it's in as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love the powertrain. I think it's fantastic. It's got really good, really strong, like 2-lane passing power. Like if you need to get around a slower vehicle on a 2-lane road in a passing zone, it's down just quickly. And like you said, it fires off these shifts. They're super crisp, super quick. The engine sounds good. The only issue I had with it was that there's a little bit of hesitation leaving the line. Did you notice that too?
Yeah.
So that takes a little bit of getting used to, I
didn't like that.
Yeah.
And I struggled with that because, I took Joe's advice and I, went down Route 11 and then came up the back roads. And I felt like every time I had to go from stop into traffic that I was kind of like, why is the car not going yet?
Right.
So I had issues with that. And I also felt like while the handling is good, and it was great on the highway, that I just felt a lot of like the bumps and, ruts in the road as I drove. And I was kind of hoping for a BMW that I would have less of that, that I would not quite feel so jarred by my drive.
That hesitation, was that like an auto start issue? Or?
I tried it with both. I turned the auto start the engine start system off, which by the way, again, another controls thing. It's not, the button isn't on the center console. You have to go wade through the touchscreen, which is annoying. And you're going to have to do it every time because it doesn't remember. You're going to have to go back into the screen. It's a multiple step process to turn it off. So I tried it both ways. And with it, even the start system off meaning it won't turn off the engine at a stoplight. It's still, when you get on the gas, there's this little bit of initial hesitation, which with dual clutch transmissions is not super uncommon. And also you've got a turbocharged engine, right? So you have potential for a little bit of turbo lag. So I think what's happening is it's a combination of that. And then, but what's happening is, so you've now pressed the throttle pedal and you're waiting for it to go, and now it's not really going.
So
but
you
then
put a little bit more pressure,
and then it really
boom!
goes. And so it's a little abrupt. I think what I learned
maybe that's what it wants you to do.
I needed to just step on the throttle pedal, and then as it started going, back off a little bit. I don't think you should have to do that. I think they can design it better than that.
I feel like I've experienced it better than that in their competitors.
And even from them.
Right. And so this is not what I was anticipating. I was looking for a little bit more of that finesse, and I wasn't finding it.
Right.
On the flip side, I found with the auto stop start, when it was turning the motor off, I ran into some, it was almost like a lurching when it would turn off as I was slowing down. It would turn off the engine and then brake the car suddenly to a stop.
Because it's turning it off before you actually come
exactly.
to stop,
like
right?
just
that's
barely.
Always a little eerie with this.
Yeah.
Some systems do that, some systems don't. I totally agree with you on the ride. I think the ride is too stiff. The handling is great. I mean, I think they did a really nice job. I think the handling is better than the last X1, and it does feel really good going through a canyon road or whatever. It just feels like like you said, like a BMW should. Nice taut steering, has some heft to it, a little bit of feedback. But I think most people aren't going to want that. That ride is so unyielding is what it feels like to me, especially when you start hitting manhole covers and things like that in a city environment. I drove through Middletown last night, and I'm like, I think it's too stiff for most people. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no. By the time I was done with the trip, I was like, okay, my back is like bothering me. Like, I just didn't feel comfortable. So even when you guys were talking about the seats, for me, I was like, yeah, the seat itself is okay, but that whole experience of like feeling every bit of the road by the end of it, I was like, the seat is not doing enough to compensate for all of that. And then on top of that, I don't know how it was for you guys, but I felt like I couldn't get a good enough driving position. I couldn't adjust the seat enough where I felt like, because I had to move it so close and so up, and then there wasn't like some more fine-tuned adjustments that I could make like I can in other cars. I felt very cramped because everything just got very close on me, and the whole thing just made the front seat not as enjoyable.
And this is why we when we do our evaluations for driving position, things like that, we have small, medium, and large. Well, I mean, tall, whatever. So we try to have evaluators of all different sizes. And so for me, the driving position was great.
Me too.
The only thing I didn't like is I thought the armrests were both a little low, so I have to droop my shoulders. But everything else, hardly any center console intrusion. I know you love when I talk about center console intrusion.
It's part of my ratings card. Bingo.
Good view of the instruments. We're noticing some cars these days when you have the steering wheel where you want it, it's blocking the top of the instruments. Doesn't do that.
This did not have that.
Hood,
yeah.
Right? So
exactly.
For me and Steve, it worked well. For you, it didn't. That's why we evaluate them with all different types of bodies, and that's why we put these how they fit different people into our road test reports.
Did you guys sit in the back seat?
I did. Yeah.
I did not, because there were child seats there.
So maybe I should ask Cece how she feels about
this.
So what did you think about the armrests on the rear outboard doors?
I liked them. They were great for me.
Really?
Yeah. What didn't you like about it?
I did not like how far inboard they jutted. And so my shoulder was like at an awkward, like I had to like move my shoulder inward. So then ended up just scooting myself over more onto the, like more inboard on the bench so I could rest my arm comfortably there. Because it just felt like it came over so far.
So if you're talking about the one on the door, if you're sitting behind the driver, you're saying it's too close to you?
Yeah.
See, I liked it because I find a lot of them are too far away. And so I have to like put my elbow over. Again, this is why you got to go and sit in these cars and find out if they work.
And
for
you
me,
try all the different spots.
Putting the fold down one and the two, they worked really good for me. Pretty good leg support.
They were at different heights.
Great headroom. No, but at least they were comfortable. You can only expect so much in a rear seat.
It sounds like we're almost saying the same thing. We just like, you and I like
things.
that cockpit feel, kind of like that.
Unevenness and being cramped is
I will say this.
Takeaway here.
The seat back does recline slightly. It has a small amount of reclinability, but I don't like where it's a pull strap lever, which is kind of, you're almost like you're sitting on it. So it's not easy to find. I much prefer when they're down next to the bottom cushion, but at least it's better than way up here. Anyway. To that end, we are, like we said, we're going to put this thing through the full Consumer Reports road test. We'll be doing that soon. Once we get the break-in miles on, don't forget to go to consumerreports.org. We have more information on the 2023 X1, as well as coming soon will be the full road test results. So please stay tuned for that. With that, let's move on to our audience question of the week. Folks, for those of you that don't watch all the time, remember the best way to reach out and talk to us is to send your questions, comments, 30-second video clips to talkingcars@icloud.com. And we love the video questions because we love to see what you guys can see what we look like. We don't know what you look like. So send in the video clips. We love those. And speaking of that, we have one today. So let's run that and see what's going on.
Hi, Talking Cars. I'm Nihal from Houston, Texas. So I'd like you to help me by telling me which manufacturers will let you order directly from them and avoid the ridiculous over MSRP markup. The second question goes to Warren Buffett's adage of price is what you pay, but value is what you get. Help me choose a family car that's a good value proposition in terms of reliability and fuel economy. It doesn't have to be an SUV. In fact, I prefer a sedan and I love a wagon. What do you think?
Okay, so there's two questions there. So we're going to throw the first one to you, Steve, which is there a way to, buy directly from automakers these days to avoid those markups?
So there is certain automakers like Tesla, Rivian, Polestar, Lucid. Those automakers, you can buy directly from them. And for the most part, they don't mark anything up. You buy on their website and then they deliver the car to you when it's ready. Now,
so all the new automakers,
Yeah,
is
basically,
what it is.
All the new electric
Yeah, you're right.
the electric automakers that don't have a dealer network, it seems like. But as for the current automakers, are like the ones that have been around for a while, it really, I think, comes down to the dealership of whether you're going to get a markup or not. Because, for example, I bought our F-150 Lightning for the test program, and when I was looking to buy that, I searched around and called various dealerships and asked them, do you have a markup on any of your vehicles? And some say, yeah, they're going to mark it up, and others say they didn't. So when I put in the reservation for the F-150 Lightning, I chose a dealership that wouldn't mark it up.
Okay.
And
go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to, you can't buy you go on Ford.com to buy that vehicle, but you can't actually place an order. It ends up being allocated to a dealership.
So you still have to do it through the dealer.
Yeah.
And is it something like putting a deposit on a vehicle at a dealer doesn't guarantee the price that you've sort of talked about, right? But if you get a purchase order, and if you've agreed to that and agreed to that price, don't you have a much better shot of when that vehicle does come in? Because that's what's happening these days, is right. People are having to wait months for their vehicles because the supply chain is so far behind. You've got a stronger chance if you get a purchase order rather than just a deposit, right?
If you can get a purchase order in advance, I think that helps. But I think it's still subject to change. You could go in there and they say this isn't a hot commodity, this is in demand right now, and I think they could sell it at a markup. So it really is at the dealer's discretion, and you want to go to one that says we don't mark up our reservation pre-order vehicles.
So you basically got
you're trusting them, though.
Yeah. So was it a oral agreement, email agreement that they said they wouldn't do it, or was it?
It was a verbal agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but they said you order it through us, or
the specific dealer that I ordered from just said, "Oh yeah, we don't do markups on pre-orders." Okay. And I said, "Okay."
So that's great advice. So make sure look around.
Life over there.
But I mean, at least, hopefully they stand by their word, right? If you don't stand by your word, what do you have?
I guess what I'm saying is it's worth calling around and
so that's the advice.
Interviewing dealerships.
Yeah. Okay. Interview your dealership. See which one has the best resume. So let's move on to the second part of the question, which is a family car that's a good value proposition in terms of reliability and fuel economy. Doesn't have. He was kind of all over the place.
Yeah, he wanted a lot of things, but I have a bone to pick about his request.
Okay, talk to us.
We get this request a lot for a family car.
Yeah.
And my issue is when I am trying to figure out what car is going to fit your family, I don't have nearly enough details. And so my size family versus Steve's size family versus what you're doing with your family is going to be very different. And so it's hard for me to be like, this is a one-size-fits-all family car that's going to work for whatever configuration you have or whatever lifestyle you have even. Like if you're a family that does a ton of sports and is constantly having to lug extra people, lug extra equipment, that totally changes the ballgame. So my request is when y'all send us our questions, give me a little more detail so I can accurately do this.
So now Doc Ems is telling everyone how they have to do their... Okay. Seriously, though, a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, he had a lot of options.
Open to options, which is good. You got to be... So since you're saying that, so you're saying you need to know more, are they small kids or are they larger?
Are they small kids, large kids? Okay. what are you doing?
Okay, and so what's your solution? What's your advice?
Of the options that he gave us,
Yes.
the one I focused on reliability and fuel economy.
Okay.
And the fact that he really wanted a sedan.
Okay.
So I went with the Honda Accord Hybrid.
Okay.
It has great fuel economy. Its predicted reliability is very good. I remember when we had that that car here as part of our test fleet, I was impressed by how spacious the interior was. I felt like it had plenty of room. The cargo space was pretty good. And really, the fuel economy was awesome.
Yeah.
So that would be the car that, of all the options that he gave us, that's what I would go with.
Steve, what
That
did
is
you
a
go
good
with?
choice. Of the options, well, first of all, I would love a wagon too, so I think that's great. But that's not really an option in this market. And I didn't hear a budget, or I don't remember if there is a budget, but I think value prop.
Yeah.
Okay, then
So
in
I
that case,
assume not super
and for the same reasons as you, Emily, I would choose the that Toyota Camry Hybrid because it gets 47 miles per gallon. It's reliable, and it's just it's a good car. He has if he's looking for reliability and fuel economy, I think that's a solid choice.
So both good answers, not the correct answers.
I was going to say, like, obviously
but
not the
good
correct answer, right?
answers. Okay, so the answer is the Toyota Prius, right? Like, because he's thinking about he mentioned Toyota Corolla, right? But the Corolla Hybrid is only available as a sedan. The Prius comes as a hatchback. So when you look at the Prius, yes, of course it has fantastic reliability. Everyone hopefully knows that. But it gets better fuel economy than the Corolla Hybrid, right? It gets amazing fuel economy, and it's a hatchback. And although he said he wanted a wagon, like you said, it's not really that viable these days. This is pretty darn close.
This is as close to a
Getting
wagon
close
as
to a
you're gonna
wagon
get.
because it's a hatchback. So I think go with the Toyota Prius.
That's a good choice.
Anyway, well, that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to learn more about the cars and the topics that we talked about, you can click on the links in the show notes. Don't forget to send those questions, comments, 30-second video clips to TalkingCars@iCloud.com. This episode was produced by Dave Abrams and edited by Andrew Belize and Anatoly Shumsky. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next week.